Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Are you ever a passenger in the car, like in the front seat, and you press the imaginary brakes? I do it a lot. Kimmy will look over at me and say, "Why are you pressing the brakes? You're not driving." It's like, I'm pressing the brakes because you're driving. You get this sense about you, right? You see things coming and you're out of control, right? And that happens to everybody. It's not just an isolated event. It's normal to have those feelings because you are out of control. You are literally at the mercy of whoever's behind that wheel. And also, anybody else that's on the road is at their mercy as well, whether they be in another vehicle or if they're on foot or on a bicycle. Today, we're going to talk about a case involving a motor vehicle being driven by a young woman where her passengers got in the car to go for a ride, and they were unable to get out under their own power because they were murdered. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, you got that imaginary brake?
Buddy, one of the worst days in my life riding with LaDonna, okay?
Yeah.
Talk about a no-driving woman. Holy free holies, man. And then she passed that along to Haley, our oldest daughter.
Yeah.
Neither one of them ever saw a pothole they didn't want to run into. And I wore the thing is, then I found out later on that she didn't wear her glasses half the time because she didn't like the way they made her look. I'm like, But you're blind without them, and you're driving. That's where Mackenzie Shirilla, at 17 years old, Joseph Scott Morgan. Let me show the reason we're talking about her. Mackenzie Shirilla, at 17 years old, intentionally, willfully, with the malice of forethought.
Malice of forethought, yeah.
She drove her car, a 2018 Toyota Camry, at 97.8 miles per hour, straight into a building. She never tapped the brakes. She accelerated in the final seconds. And she killed her boyfriend of many years, Dominic Russo, and a friend, a good guy, Davian Flanagan, who was 19. Dominic was 20. Davian was 19. Mackenzie was 17. It happened at 5:30 in the morning, July 31st, 2022. And the reason we're talking about this case now is because, Joe, when a car accident happens, we always look at it and you go, wow, I wonder what happened. Because everybody drives and we go, well, it could have happened to anybody. That's usually how we try to think. But I remember back in the day, in order to get your driver's license at 16, you had to take driver's ed.
Yeah.
And once you took driver's ed, then you could get your license at 16. If you didn't take it, you couldn't get your license till you're 18. That's where it was when I was that age. But anyway, my driver's ed instructor said this, Joe. There's no such thing as a car accident. It's a wreck. Somebody is at fault.
Yeah.
And he did this whole scenario with the class,
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, what about if the road's slick and it's raining and you lose control of your car? Well, you were driving too fast for the conditions. What if you hit a patch of black ice and you skid? Well, you were driving too fast, or, everything people had to say as an excuse to call a wreck an accident. He had a legitimate, real answer why it wasn't an accident. And he said it's the worst thing in the world to call it because an accident means it was unavoidable. An accident means it was nobody's fault.
Right.
And every accident is a wreck. And I believe in this one, even though at first, Joe, there were a lot of people thinking, wow, this is a horrific accident. One car, 5:30 in the morning, and it never was an accident. It's shocking to me, and I'm curious as to how you're going to explain how two people ended up dead in the car and the driver didn't die.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something, and that's the way it happens lots of times, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you've got, and most of the time you're talking about somebody, it always happens to the, you know, the person that's inebriated and they drive the
Right.
vehicle, and, you know, the old adage is they're so relaxed and laid back, you know, and people get all tensed up in a vehicle. Or the, you know, and they're the ones that don't get hurt, you know, the ones that kind of perpetrated the event or started that chain of that sequence, that cataclysmic sequence that leads to death. Let me confess something to you, because we don't normally on body bags, we don't talk about motor vehicle accidents very frequently. And you'd be surprised how many in my field we work, I think, because anytime you have a vehicle on the side of the road, and particularly if you've got a vehicle that has an individual pinned inside of it, or the injuries are so catastrophic that there's not a chance that the person survived, we're going to be out there. That is the ME investigator, and we'll be working alongside the accident investigators as well. By the way, unsung heroes, by my estimation. You know, every time I'd go down to the police academy, this is over in Georgia at the State Police Academy, where the training facility was in Forsyth, Georgia. You drive right by it if you're headed to Florida and Georgia or on I-75. I used to feel sorry for the police officers that were down there getting their traffic investigation certification. It is a multi-stage event that you had to go through multiple classes. And Dave, the lion's share of what you're learning is trigonometry. And it is, you get drugged through a keyhole, and everybody else, you know, you might be eating lunch or something. Everybody might be laughing and smiling. They're doing a blood deposition class, or this one's doing a shooting reconstruction class, or this one's learning. They used to have a class called verbal judo down there. There were all kinds of classes like that. Right. But you would see these guys that were in the traffic investigation classes. They were serious as a heart attack. And I remember, you know, they'd have their calculators out. They'd be, you know, running formulas and all those sorts of things. It's not, so when I would go out to scenes, I'd always try to look for something that would edify me as an investigator. And I always tried to stay close to them without getting in their way, and just trying to, you know, get a free education, you know, CEUs on my part, you know, actively at the scene. And I would learn so much from them. Of course, I didn't retain a lot of it, but they do it day in and day out. And they are true. They really are. They're forensic practitioners, and people generally don't regard them that way. But the calculations they have to do, and trying to understand the dynamics of vehicles, they have to understand motor vehicles, all shapes and sizes of vehicles. They have to understand various road surfaces. So when you have a case such as this, and I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag here, where we're talking about a motor vehicle that is being driven at an incredibly high rate of speed. You know, we're talking right in the neighborhood of 100 miles per hour, and it doesn't strike just any object. It strikes a building, okay, a brick building at almost 100 miles per hour. You're going to have catastrophic damage, and it's not surprising. It's not surprising that individuals within the vehicle are deceased. I think in this case, though, what really confuses some people, not everybody, is that an individual the vehicle is actually part of a homicide investigation.
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. Have you ever seen a case where a vehicle was used as a weapon?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have. And so
that's what this is.
Yeah, it is. And so it's weaponization of a motor vehicle, and it can be used, and it can be any kind of vehicle. Exhibit 1A, you know, 9/11. Okay. All right. That's a motor vehicle. All right. It's an airplane. It's being flown into a building. And there are any number of instances where we have plane crashes that There's a very famous one, as a matter of fact. I won't go too far off in the distance here, but there was a plane crash that occurred out on Air Force Base many years ago, and the pilot had, his boss in the plane with him. And I swear, Dave, I think this may have been a B-52. I'm not really sure. A really big plane, and he intentionally crashed that plane and killed everybody on board. You can have this with boats. I submit to you, you could have it with a jet ski. You could have it with a snowmobile if you so chose to. And certainly cars are part of it as well. I've seen cars used, obviously, we work motor vehicle accidents, and we even have an acronym for it. It's called the MVA. You'll hear paramedics use it. You'll hear doctors use it in the emergency room. Cops certainly use it. We use it, and we'll just say an MVA instead of saying a motor vehicle accident. Even the word accident is built into the framing here. But you can have the weaponization of a motor vehicle, particularly, let's just say you have perfect timing, okay? When a pedestrian is going to be crossing the street. They have a daily routine, or the individual driving the vehicle sees a pedestrian walking down the street, or they see a vehicle that is occupied by a person they have a grudge against. And they use that vehicle that they're driving as a battering ram. They have weaponized the vehicle. The tough thing to do with these cases, even more so, I think, than firearms cases, Dave, is you have to demonstrate on some level intent. And intent is very difficult, to kind of play out. And if you're going to say, well, this is a homicide and the vehicle was weaponized, was there intent to use this and weaponize the motor vehicle in order to take somebody else's life? And that's really, for a prosecutor, I think that's very difficult, even more so than a firearm or a knife or a baseball bat, Dave.
Well, Joe, when you get right down to it, you have to prove that the person behind the wheel of the car intentionally crashed that vehicle into something to cause death or dismemberment of someone else in the vehicle.
Yeah.
That's a tough road to hoe, because if you're in the vehicle yourself and you're crashing it, then it's almost like a self-harm thing. I mean, were you trying to take yourself out at the same time that you were trying to take out the other person? And you can always come back with, it was an accident. My foot slipped. I got confused. We were having an argument. I mean, any number of things can be said. This is not an easy thing to prove. Now, in today's cars, though, we got the black box in these cars, Joe.
Yeah. Boy, you do. Yeah, it's not like you're driving Papa's 1955 pick-em-up truck, okay, with 3 on the tree or whatever it was. Those days have passed. So, the accuser in court is pointing at you, and it's an electronic black box that's literally recording all of this data. Dave, we even talk about on all the platforms that you and I appear on, how many times has the black box or the information coming off the vehicle played into a case, with movement and those sorts of things. Where did they go? What did they do? I think that even in the Murdaugh case,
I was going to say it was Murdaugh.
The data off of that truck is used.
Yeah. You got to remember, and that case is going to go back to trial, Joe. And the Murdaugh case is a prime example of what you're saying, because in that, the black box inside of Alec Murdaugh's truck, actually, based on the timetable the prosecution put forward, it showed that Maggie's phone was in his possession in his vehicle as he's driving down the road. He slows down or stops, and then they find the phone right in that area where he threw it out, or that's what they suggested happened based on the black box. And the same thing is true with Mackenzie Shirilla, because there was activity inside that vehicle. And, Joe, if it's an accident, if it's something unintentional, there would be activity inside the vehicle with the brakes, maybe the transmission. There would be something that might indicate you were attempting to slow down, attempting to miss the target.
Yeah, and also to speed up. So one thing's true, the other thing's got to be true as well, right? So
Yep.
if you're engaging an accelerator and they have described this case in terms of, her foot being buried on the accelerator, this thing is maxed out, Dave. So is that enough information to prove intent? I don't know. There's been a number of terms over the years that describe people that drive erratically and certainly people that drive fast. I think one of the ones that comes to mind most quickly is probably they have a lead foot. But in this case, we do in fact have a vehicle that was driven at a speed that to say is unreasonable is a grand understatement. And it was that foot pressing that accelerator that was driven into a fixed object, a building, that led to the deaths of 2 innocent young men. Dave, have I ever told you a story about a case that I worked years ago of a guy on a motorcycle that was dropping acid? I don't know if I ever told you that.
I'm going to assume you're talking about somebody who is actually taking a hit of acid, not dropping acid off the back of their motorcycle while they're driving.
Acid.
Okay,
yeah,
so
both these guys, they were on a Harley. There were 2 guys.
A friend of Timothy Leary. Is that where we're going here? All right.
So 2 guys on a Harley, and they had dropped acid. And this is like a full-size Harley with the saddle, the big solid saddlebags and the thing in the back and all that. And the guy just bought it. And these things are very expensive, obviously. I'm not a motorcycle guy, but, even my ignorant self knows that. And he's racing up and down the street with this guy on the back. And the street ended in a T-bone with another cross street ended right. It's not really a cross street. It just ends. There's a stop sign, dead ends into another street. And on the other side, there's a lawn and a solid wall of brick. And this guy is racing down the road with a lysergic acid on board. His buddy's taking a hit of acid. And right as they were passing by the stop sign, at about 65 miles per hour. This street is only 2 blocks long. Guy on the rear says, "I'm out of here." He jumps off, breaks both legs. The driver continues on through the brick wall. You and I grew up with Looney Tunes, right? Bugs Bunny Roadrunner Hour. Every Saturday morning, right? It lasted 90 minutes. Favorite thing. Best thing going. Do you remember when the coyote would go through a wall and you'd see the outline of the coyote? Yeah. That's what happened. This guy went through the wall. You could see the outline of his head and the handlebars through the wall. Lady on the other side of the wall was in bed watching Carson. This guy clips a gas line. He's a ball of fire, winds up in the bed next to her. She winds up with 2nd, 3rd degree burns. Husband's in the other room, in like the den, watching television. He hears a crash, runs in. Whole room's involved
Finds
in
his wife
flame.
in bed with a man on fire. What'd you do?
Yeah, I know, right? He drags her out, saves her. And that guy, we went out to that scene. I'll never forget that as long as I live, because that was the first time I ever saw a motor vehicle go through a wall, through a brick wall. And this fixed object. Now, I had other cases where people actually took their own lives using a motor vehicle, running.
I'm picturing that couple, Joe.
Yeah,
I'm picturing that couple in divorce court where the guy goes, "Judge, she was in bed with the devil."
Yeah,
dude,
I know.
He was on fire.
Yeah. It's
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, and I think that people underestimate. We ride around in cars all the time. People underestimate the level of violence that is involved in a motor vehicle accident. There's many of us, including myself, that have almost died in motor vehicles. You underestimate the power of a car. You turn this car, which is essentially a missile traveling on 4 wheels, and you get it up to a high rate of speed, And the deadly element to this thing is, as it's traveling through space, did you know that when you hit a fixed object, and really grab hold of this, when you hit a fixed object and you're not belted in a car, that when that car stops, it's a ripple effect. Everything contained, if you're traveling at 100 miles per hour, essentially all of the non-anchored elements within the cabin of that car are still traveling at that same rate of speed, even though the front portion of the car has stopped. So that's why you get these horrific injuries with people slamming into things and bouncing off. Even airbag deployments can create horrific injuries. I've seen those. I've seen seatbelt injuries. I've seen people die of seatbelt injuries with cardiac tamponades, belt crosses right here.
Okay, wait a minute.
Sternum fractures.
What you call
cardiac
it? What?
Tamponade. Yeah, it's like there's a ripping that goes on within the pericardial sac surrounding the heart. It's like this, the heart gets kind of torqued like this. The aorta might rip, or you'll have a laceration to the pericardial sac, fills up with blood. You'll have punctured lungs, all sorts of things. The dynamics of it, it's so much more violent than even shootings most of the time. I think people are surprised by that. When we get individuals on the table at the morgue, you find all kinds of weird things on bodies, because you'll have, if there's like logos in the car, you'll see abrasion impressions, on the car. You'll see people that are struck in the head by things that are traveling from the rear seat into the front. It's just absolutely amazing. So when this young woman drove this car into the side of the building, and Dave, I got to tell you, if you guys have not seen the video on this thing, and I think probably a good number of you have, I got to tell you, it's something to behold, Brother Dave.
We have a clip of the car, and you can see it flying by. Watch this, and what you're seeing is the south side of the building crash and the approach. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what you're watching there. But when the car is coming down Progress Road,
right,
which is the name of the road that they're on, and Mackenzie Shirilla is in the driver's seat. She's 17.
Yeah.
It's 5:30 in the morning, and her boyfriend Dominic is 20. Her friend Davian is 19, and I do have to wonder. Okay, they're not getting up early to go fishing. Okay,
Yeah.
it's 5:30 in the morning, and they've been out. So I have a real problem with this case because of Mackenzie's underage. Okay, she's 17. She's still a minor.
Yeah.
And her parents are letting her live with Dominic, her boyfriend. He's 20. Okay.
Yeah.
Mackenzie is not the most responsible young woman in the world. She smokes so much weed that she actually has a condition that causes her to cough up black weed lung stuff, so that she has to stop smoking it for a while. Is that not true?
Yeah, that's actually what has been talked about extensively.
And I think it's important to point that out.
Well, yeah, it is, and I think that I could defer and say, well, she's self-medicating because of her anxiety.
Yeah, I give you that.
Well,
all right.
We're all creatures of free will, even at 17 years of age, and so regardless of what you're doing to try to relieve your anxiety, again, with these two young men, I'm thinking, who's going to relieve the anxiety of their family now? Because, now they're just absolutely ripped to shreds and destroyed. And the medical examiner up in Ohio still to this point has not released the autopsy reports, but I can go down the list and tell you what you could expect relative to injuries on two subjects that are within a vehicle traveling at this rate of speed.
I did want to point something out, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. I mentioned the weed thing, not because it plays a part in the accident. It plays a part in the person who is driving the vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason I bring it up is because Mackenzie Shirilla, at 17 years old, had been given a lot of grace by her parents. They had given her a lot of room she had yet to earn, okay? This was a young lady that should have been tamped down. Parents have got to bear responsibility when their 17-year-old girls are out at 5:30 in the morning with their live-in boyfriend and not living at home. I mean, there has to be some responsibility, guys. We're adults. We're the adults. We have the children. We're supposed to raise the children. When you allow a 20-year-old to now take over the parenting of your 17-year-old, I
Yeah.
got a problem with you. But that's a
Yeah.
different discussion for a different day. Bottom line, Mackenzie Shirilla was behind the wheel of a car at 5:30 in the morning with her boyfriend and another good friend, and they're dead and didn't walk away. She didn't walk away, but they used the jaws of life to get her out to show you how bad it was. But Joe, when they first got there to the wreck, Davion was on top of Dominic.
Yeah.
They were on top of one another in the front seat, under the dashboard.
Yeah. Did you know that, look, everybody wants to retain their humanity and talk about, we're all viable individuals and everything. Car wrecks don't care. They don't care about your feelings. And so I've had cases where a non-belted subject in the rear of the vehicle now becomes a flying object, a lethal flying object. Now, what can happen is, and here's a little aside here, Dave, and something that we talk about a lot. We use the term blunt force trauma, right? We talk about it extensively. How many homicides have we had with these poor victims where somebody has literally been beaten to death? We talk about they beat people with their fists, they stomp on people, they use objects. The leading cause of blunt force trauma worldwide are motor vehicle accidents. There's nothing that even becomes anywhere close to that. It outpaces everything. Okay. As a matter of fact, the lion's share of violent deaths in America are attributed to motor vehicle accidents. Okay. So you think about that and those numbers become quite overwhelming. We see everything in these vehicles. And so, yeah, if you've got one subject that is on top of another, trust me, as that individual, as that vehicle makes that sudden stop, it's going from 100 to 0 in a split second. The passengers within the vehicle are not. They're not going to that. Okay. The vehicle has to stop first. They are being conveyed by the motor vehicle. So they begin traveling. And yeah, they can actually strike another person. Let's just say something as innocuous as a forearm, okay, in life, okay? If I bump into you with my forearm, okay, not intentionally.
Hey, stop that.
But if I bump into you with the forearm, you probably won't even get a bruise with it, okay? You take the blade of my arm right here, and as I am contracting like this, and I'm traveling through space, and I strike the back of your head, you're going to die. Because now, this is a blunt force object. That energy is being transferred to you and into the back of your head, or the leading edge of my head, or my shoulder, okay? So the interior of a vehicle is so dynamic with the twisting, the turning, and not to mention, you don't know how the vehicle is going to be skewed relative to the impact dynamic. And here's another little twist too that people are not aware of. And dig this, let me lay this on you if you want terror. As a motor vehicle strikes like a building like this, we deal with something else that's called the engine block intrusion. Now you can extrapolate from that what you want, but just let me lay it out in layman's terms. A motor vehicle that is, or an engine block that is bolted down, okay, Ford, all right? I can't speak to VW Beetles from the 60s, okay? But if you're talking about a Camry where the engine block is literally bolted down, all right, guess what happens? As that vehicle hammers into that wall, the engine starts its journey rearward.
Wow.
That energy transfer goes into the engine block. The engine block acts as a driver for the dashboard. Now, you think about how it's got those kind of molded edges on the dashboard, and you even touch your dashboard. I've got a truck, and so I touch my dashboard. There's a couple of soft spots on it, feel like I could lay my head on it and take a nap. However, if I hit a building, okay, the engine is coming back toward me and it's going to drive. That's how pinning happens. You were talking about how she had to be extricated with the jaws of life. Well, this thing is like a tin can. It's folding in on itself. All right. And I got to tell you, I'm amazed that she survived. And it's almost like this turns into an attempted self-harm event with an adjacent double homicide here, Dave.
And that's where, when I was looking over this entire case, Joe, I was like, okay, when officers arrive on scene, they're trying to determine what's going on. They think they got 3 fatalities. Now, at first, they couldn't find the 2 guys, okay, because they were compressed on one another in the front, under it. But then they heard Mackenzie. They heard her make a noise and realized, hey, we got to get her out. And they started talking about breaking the window. They might have to shoot the window out. Yeah. But they did use the jaws of life. And then Mackenzie was taken and helicoptered to the hospital. She did suffer a broken leg, some broken ribs and other injuries, but survived and seems to be pretty lucid through most of this. It was the 2 guys, Davion and Dominic. They're the ones who paid the ultimate price for her driving.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what the prosecution is faced with in a case like this is, how do we prove intent? Well, it's hard to determine that, but I'll tell you what's not hard to determine. The lethal realities of being completely innocent and facing death head on in the form of a building, and a 17-year-old seated beside you with her foot buried in the floorboard. Dave, being drunk or being high is not an excuse, but there's something to it, those conditions, that gives you pause where you can say, oh, okay, I understand. Okay.
Oh, okay. I see where you're headed with this. Sorry. I was sitting here thinking, okay, wait a minute, Joe. We're going down a wrong path.
Yeah, no, I'm not endorsing driving under the influence, but I'm talking about just trying to rationalize this.
Under normal conditions, this person wouldn't have done this.
Right. Yeah, precisely. And I'm just thinking there has to be more to it, because, I think the portion of intention here goes to when you see that vehicle, as the CCTV imagery reveals, where she's operating the vehicle and driving it in a reasonable manner on this, the adjacent inbound lanes, and she activates her blinker, she turns the wheel, and then all of a sudden, she launches down the street, and you see her, after she's made this intentional turn onto the street, and like a rocket, she's traveling and then diverts off of the roadway, so that not only does she hit the building, she clips this big sign that's out in the adjacent area. And still, that doesn't diminish the velocity of the, well, I guess it could, but it doesn't diminish the lethality here of what she's demonstrating. Dave, one thing that people don't understand is that when you have a case like this, how you mentioned the black box earlier,
right?
Well, when they pull that data off of those recording devices, they don't just do that. Did you know that there are actually mechanics that work for police and for state police departments, where they go in and they completely assess the vehicle? Do the brakes work? Does the steering work? Is there a problem with the accelerator?
I was actually doing some research for one of the stories we were doing on Crime Stories with Nancy Grace,
Yeah.
and I was reading a report that was written by one of those people that does that for law enforcement and their training, and they're able to break. They probably can build a car that would drive up and down the road out of Legos. Their ability, their engineering ability
Yeah.
goes beyond what you would think. These are experts in the field of
Yeah.
reconstruction, not just of the accident, but of the vehicle. And they can figure out if the calipers on the brakes were aligned properly,
Yeah. They
if the
can.
brake pads were, if they're wear and tear on the brake pads, they can determine all of that before they ever come to a conclusion about what took place when the car ended up impacting something. It's amazing.
Yeah. And accident investigators like this, because there are deputized mechanics out there that are actually post certified police officers that in some departments where they work specifically for the police that would be, you would pay them a couple of $100 to work. They're so talented to work on your car. I'll tell you another group of people that are fascinating to hang out with, and I've had a chance to. Some of these investigators are the people that work for NTSB. They investigate plane crashes, train crashes, major truck events, and all this sort of thing. And they have this incredible mind for understanding accident dynamics that most of us can't even, you don't even know that this stuff goes on out there. You know that somebody investigates it, but when you get into the nuts and bolts, but it's people like this that have to go back in and take a look at the vehicle and just try to understand, was the vehicle safe, okay, to begin with. You couple that with what they find at autopsy. And just let me run down some of the injuries real quick when you think about these victims. So first off, you're going to have massive blunt force trauma on both of these victims. And it's going to range to a variety of different areas. If you're seated, like in a front seat, you can expect broken legs. And many times those broken legs are not necessarily because they got directly impacted on the side. Do you know what happens, Dave? If you're positioned in a vehicle like this and you take that impact, did you know the energy of that impact travels up your legs? It'll travel up your legs, and sometimes you can get fractures on your femurs.
Oh
You
my
see this
God.
in plane crashes, actually, going back to plane crashes. Every plane crash I've ever worked, I think to a person, well, I'll say that probably 70% of the people on plane accidents have broken ankles bilaterally. And it's because of pressing down like this. It's that energy transfer. Then you have the snapping of the neck or the breaking of the neck. Now, that can either be an energy transfer event where the neck is being whiplashed so badly, or if you're getting struck from the side, like you're being T-boned, you'll have that energy transfer that will fracture those bones, or you can impact something where it directly fractures, some of the vertebral bodies. Always have broken ribs every single time. And that's one of the real dangers here with motor vehicle accidents. We talk about the head, and the head is dangerous. I'll get to that in a second. But when you think about the ribs, all right, matter of fact, my dearest aunt in the world, my Aunt Roxy, I love this woman. She's a school teacher, taught school for 51 years, and one of the first female graduates from Louisiana Tech University. She got T-boned in her 80s, and it was a fractured lung or a fractured rib that went into her lung and punctured her lung, killed her. And that happens quite a bit when you go into the chest, Dave, at autopsy and we call it a flail chest, so that running down both sides, you'll have these fractures of the ribs, and they'll all kind of be in concert, and you'll see the breastplate kind of floating in there, and it's detached. Well, you have fractured lungs, you can have a lacerated heart. So when you open the body and you take off the breastplate, as we do, you see it in television shows and whatnot, literally the organs of the chest, the lungs, and the heart are floating in blood. Okay. As a matter of fact, it gets so extensive, we actually use ladles in stainless steel ladles in the morgue, and they have specific incremental measurements on them. And we do what's called bailing. We'll actually retract the lung and bail out the chest and do the measurement on how much blood is in each chest cavity, both the left and the right. That's something that we commonly do. You actually have lacerated livers, and which the liver sits so close to the surface that as a result of those impacts, interestingly enough, forensic pathologists will refer to a lacerated liver as a fractured liver, which is really weird because it's not a bone. But they'll talk about the fracturing of the liver in a spider web many times. You'll have these multiple lacerations that just kind of extend out. The spleen, very delicate organ, you'll have it impacted directly. Many times they have to do splenectomies on people that survive motor vehicle accidents. And you can survive without a spleen. But if it's not gotten to, it becomes hemorrhagic and you can die. And of course, that brings us to the brain. The brain in a motor vehicle accident can go a couple of different directions. We have something that's referred to as coup and contra coup injuries. And so when you get an impact to the head, let's say your head snaps to the left, well, your brain is floating inside of your skull in cerebral spinal fluid contained within the dura sac. Your brain will actually slam against one skull wall and travel back and slam against the other skull wall. So you'll have bilateral hemorrhagic focal areas of hemorrhage in the brain. You can also get it like this, where you'll have an individual that snaps forward and snaps back, and you have these real delicate vessels in there. So it's almost like with motor vehicle accidents with both of these young men, when you're looking and trying to assess their injuries, it's like pick your poison, because any number of these areas, Dave, can be lethal. So when she floored that car and drove it into the wall, these kids probably at that rate of speed, these young men, would have had a better shot at surviving literally if she had shot each one of them, as opposed to this. This is so catastrophic at this speed. There are planes that actually follow the air that crash at a slower speed many times if they have some level of control over the plane. It's not that she didn't have control. She chose not to have control of the vehicle other than controlling it directly at that brick wall, Brother Dave.
You say she had perfect control of the car.
Yeah.
And that's why when it, at first it was ruled an accident. Okay. That was changed because when the information came out,
Yeah.
they determined it was not an accident. Now,
Can I stop you right there and tell you, listen, I want everybody to really latch onto this. Most motor vehicle accidents or events are not homicides. So if you're thinking about this case and you're thinking, why in the heck did he change it? The reason he changed it is because intent had to enter into it, because the ME is going to look at ME's and coroner is going to look at most motor vehicle events as an accidental event. And so the police have to come to the ME and literally convince them to say, Doc, this is not an accident. She had intent to do this. And it's only at that moment in time where the doc was motivated, in this case, to change that manner. The cause stayed the same. Cause stayed the same. Manner changed, though.
and that's why it ended up going to court. Now, Mackenzie Shirilla opted for a bench trial. That means not in front of a jury. You just present your case to the judge, and that judge will make the decision. Judge Nancy Margaret Russo, not related to Dominic, obviously, she pointed to several factors when finding Mackenzie Shirilla guilty. She pointed to the controlled turn onto Progress Drive. Remember how Joe was talking about the car showed perfect control, maneuvering using the blinker, all the way to getting on Progress Drive, which was the road that goes straight into a T-bone, where if you go straight, you jump the curve, go straight into the building after clipping that the sign, which is exactly what happened. The car accelerated all the way. Never were the brakes touched. These are the things that caused the judge to rule guilty. Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to 15 years to life. for the murder of Dominic Russo and Davian. And the reason it's getting this kind of attention is because probably the Netflix series as much as
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Crash is on Netflix, but a lot of it has to do with what Mackenzie and her family have acted like since this came down. There's a lack of accountability. There's a lot of excuses. But I'm here to tell you, Joe, I said it earlier. You got a 17-year-old child that's not living in your home and you're okay with that? I got a problem with you as a parent. They're
Yeah.
your responsibility. They're not grown up at 17 at all. So Mackenzie Shirilla proved that she should not have been anywhere near driving a car with two men in it at 5:35 that morning.
No, she shouldn't. And, you know, and again, just like in many of these cases that we discussed, Brother Dave, it might be within the cold stone walls of a prison in Ohio where she gets to live out her days, at least for the time being. But still, she's living. Dominic and Davion are not. There ain't gonna be no Christmases, there ain't gonna be no grandbabies, there ain't gonna be nothing else to hold on to. Just the memories of a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old that are now gone because somebody selfishly decided to end their lives at over 100 miles per hour, headed headlong into a brick wall.
I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bag.